First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk, guys. We do have a great video coming your way right now. We're going to break down one of those leaked videos that came out of Arizona. It's a tough video to watch. So again, you know, I wouldn't, if you have a child next to you, whatever, it's not a video you want a child to see, but definitely if you work in this profession, this is a video that you must see because this highlights the dangers of our job. But there's also more to it than that. You know, basically, are we doing enough to protect those brave men and women that work behind the wall? We're going to have a very interesting panel to break down this video, but also to discuss what we would expect an agency to do, right? If they're looking to protect us and motivate us and make us want to do our jobs, you know, we're going to discuss what we would expect from them so we stay motivated and we are effective and we build that trust that we need with the agency when we come to doing a job like this. I do have 3 sponsors, guys, by the way. We have American Military University. Guys, if you're looking to get a degree and kind of bring experience back into the classroom, please check out American Military University. They have been supporting me since day one. They believe in our mission. It's a great online school, and it's always a good idea, man. If you want to get that degree, get that degree. Also, Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. We're also going to welcome a new sponsor who's helping me out as well. It's called The Wrap. So, again, I want to thank our sponsor, The Wrap, by Safe Restraints, Inc. Safe Restraints, Inc. Controlling combative subjects quickly and in upright position so they can breathe has never been more important. Departments such as Washington, D.C., L.A. County, San Diego County, and hundreds of other facilities across the U.S. trust and believe in the Wrap restraint. That's W-R-A-P. Go to saferestraints.com for contact information and mention Tier Talk to receive instructor training at no cost. Low reliability for your facility and your personnel with The Wrap. Give The Wrap a call today at 1-800-WRAP-911. If you guys go into the description, you're going to see a video that's going to show you exactly what The Wrap is. Guys, it's a very unique tool. Definitely something we need, especially in today's day and age. So if you get a chance, please check it out. Okay, guys, so let's introduce the panel. First, we have the famous author. Look at her shaking her head. I was talking about Gary York, Connie. I mean, yeah, but you know what? Now I might as well just bring you on. We have Connie Alleyne. You're muted, Connie.
Doing it. I'm unmuting. So thank you for having me, as always. Connie Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy, where we provide training to non-uniformed employees who are working in this environment. I'm also the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon, and I am the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall. Very disturbing video that we are going to watch, but you know, it's part of the job, right? Most civilians don't expect to ever have this experience. That's one thing I must say. So as someone who actually has worked in the field for a long time, it was very difficult to take it all in.
Yeah, and I think it's great to have you on, Connie, because we do need that perspective. Because remember, these warriors behind the wall are protecting the civilians. So if you see that happening to one of our warriors, I don't think it's going to motivate you to do your job. You know,
how safe am I going to feel?
That's the key.
Right.
If we don't take care of our warriors, we're not going to be conducive to any programming or any other service that has to be done. So we have also a fellow influencer. He's got a channel called True Prison Stories. Has a new book out there called The Toughest Job. Gary York. I would have chose Toughest Career, but I'm just messing. All right, Toughest Job. What's up, Gary? How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me, Anthony. Hello, everybody out there. I'm Gary York, author of The Toughest Job, Correctional Officer USA. I have a YouTube called True Prison Stories. and I did 28.8 years in corrections, both on the state prison side, and I ended my career with the in detention with the county sheriff. And it is a very disturbing incident. We've seen these things happen from time to time, and it's very disturbing what happened. Anthony knows I wasn't happy with something that we're going to talk about later from my end of it. I did 12 years of those 28.8 years as a senior prison inspector conducting criminal, civil, and administrative investigations in the Florida prison system. And thank you for having me, Anthony.
Always a pleasure, Gary. And I know your book is doing well. If you guys get a chance, please check out Gary author's new book, Gary York's new book, The Toughest Job. And also, if you get a chance, cross over to his YouTube channel, True Prison Stories. We, I think what we provide here, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. So if you're in the field, you definitely want to check out these resources. Okay, now we also have two other guests. I'm going to start first with the person who brought these videos to my attention, and we are going to work on one today, and then we are going to do another one, hopefully probably next week. But this is someone that's dedicated to the profession. He believes in the work that our men and women do behind the wall, and he called me and he pushed me to do whatever I can to get this video on, and the dedication, and just to have someone like that in your corner. Again, if you're out in Arizona or just in the corrections profession, I'd like you to meet Brian Kovacs. What's up, Brian?
How you doing, Anthony?
Always a pleasure, man. You mind introducing yourself, Brian?
So I'm Brian Kovacs. I'm the founder of Talking Guns. We're a news and information resource. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. We usually stick to things in the weapon industry and or Second Amendment related. But being retired law enforcement and having worked with the Arizona Department of Corrections here specifically, I have a soft spot in my heart for the guys that are out there doing that job. And this video is something pretty disturbing and something that I couldn't even comprehend happening while I was working there. And I've been helping to assist Carlos, who you'll introduce next, with getting the information out there to people and letting the public see what's actually going on behind the wall.
Yeah, and by the way, obviously, we know each other for a few years now. You're a great advocate for the profession. It's like you never left it. I mean, you're still fighting. And sometimes the best battles aren't the ones that are fighting on the inside, but the ones fighting on the outside. So obviously, I appreciate you. And Carlos Garcia, I got a chance to see him in action. Now, he's the executive director for the Arizona CPOA. And he's all over that media, ABC 15, and he's making sure that those concerns are being heard. And I guarantee you guys, we need more of people like Carlos out there bringing that to public's attention, because I don't think the public knows. So what Carlos is doing is stepping out there on the front. He's actually giving people an experienced perspective. And when it comes to an experienced perspective, that's very hard to challenge, because at the end of the day, you could read all the books you want, but it's experience that truly knows what happens behind those walls. So, Carlos, do you mind, first time on the channel, do you mind introducing yourself to my audience?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Anthony, for inviting me to the show. Brian and everybody, hello. Nice to be here. It's nice to be here. And this this horrible video, as Connie said, it was very uncomfortable to watch, but there's something more uncomfortable than even that's disturbing. And we know in this profession, these kind of things happen. So I've been with the department. I did 20 years and retired. And, I worked every custody level from the supermax to the death row, even women's prison, done it all. I spent 3 years working for Director Shiro, as her private investigator, and looking at all the things that they try to cover up. And, once I retired, I was invited to join the union, one of the biggest unions we have here in Arizona, to protect the correction officers. And it's a tough job, not because it's not so much that we have to defend them against the inmate population. In this video that you guys that are about to see, one of the most horrendous aspects, Anthony, is not that there's an officer getting assaulted. That comes with the territory. I get it. And people, especially civilians, we got to cater them. They're going to think, well, you're working in a prison. This is bound to happen. Here's a special situation that you're going to see in this one and probably the next one for next week, is that the department put them in that situation. It should have never happened. Why? You're going to realize here when we start talking about the videos, that those inmates in particular that assaulted them, A, had no reason to assault the staff. The reason they did is because they're out of place. The department has come with a phony program. That's what I'm calling it. Anyone that worked in correction, even in other states, they're probably going to empathize what we're saying. They've come up with a phony plan to save money by saying, listen, housing up, for example, a level 5 convict costs a lot of money. I wonder if there's a sneaky way to keep him as a level 5, because we can't change that by law. But how about if we bump him down a lower level? Now we don't have to house him in a supermax, in a lockdown facility that costs a lot of money. We can now pretend that he's a 4, a level 4, which is a lower custody. Now he doesn't have to be locked down, and now he can walk around amongst the general public. The problem is, Anthony, these guys have nothing to lose. That's why they're a level 5. Highly assaultive, murdering, gang members, leadership of gang members are now walking among staff, and they have nothing to lose. They know that I can just do whatever I want, assault you. We're going to assault you because we don't like you. You're officers. Why should we like you? We're in prison for a reason, and you're not going to do anything about it, and that's the case that you're going to see here. And nothing was done to those inmates. That's the worst part of this whole video.
And the funny thing is, the overrides that I'm used to are usually the overrides that protect us. The overrides that, you may have an inmate that's eligible for lower level, but let me put the override in and keep them at a higher level because the person's behavior just doesn't warrant that. However, the system regulates that status. The overrides are usually in protection to say, well, you know what, the inmate has, let's say, this amount of points, and technically they're eligible for lower level, but
Correct.
What? Let's put the override and keep them at the higher level. I don't think in my career, I can't recall any time the override was used to take a higher level into a lower level. So that's very unique. And that's great that it gets out there so people can understand a little bit of that practice. But again, usually I would implement the override on the adverse of that, for protection. Yeah, the guy's eligible for lower level, but I'm going to stick him up, put an override, keep him where he's at, because behavior just, sometimes that score doesn't reflect the inmate. You know what I
Correct.
mean? But to see it on the opposite side, to see that the score, you have a higher inmate, but you're using the override to move the inmate down. To even think of that as an idea, I could tell that the focus of the people that implemented that wasn't about safety and security. To even think of that as an idea, that focus wasn't about what we could do best for the facility, what we could do best to protect our people. That was literally about either something that's cost saving or, I just don't. To me, it's unique. I'm sure it's there. We have overrides as a fail safe, but I've never seen it gone this way. So anyway, what I'm going to do, guys, let me bring everybody onto the stream. So let's get Brian on. Let's get Gary on. Let's get Connie back on. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to quickly show you the video. I want you to pay attention first to the upper left corner. Then the action's going to move over to the lower right. Then it gets to like mid left, and then eventually you'll see the response. Now, guys, when we do this video, we're going to show it straight out. And then as we discuss it, I'll show you the clips so we could specifically, let you see exactly what we're discussing. Everybody here pretty much knows this video backwards and forwards. But again, I just want to let you guys see the video. So the video right now is going to play. So again, look to the upper left first. So as you can see, they got the officers in the left, and there it goes. Okay, so who they're hitting is the officer. Hey, can you talk us through this a little bit, Carlos, while we go through this?
Here's the thing. We know this case in depth, Anthony. So here's the problem. These inmates had absolutely no reason to assault him other than the fact that what you guys are looking at are inmates that should not be in this facility. These are locked down inmates, level 5s, worst of the worst. Here they are working amongst officers that are trained to work general population. And just to set the record straight, that poor staff didn't even know he's new. He's got like a year and change in the department. So he's still learning the ropes. He had no idea what classification of inmate he's dealing with. These were not level 3s and 4s like they were thinking. These are level 5s, with some cheesy title known as a override. Okay, so they're taking a high custody inmate to save money and putting him in the lower custody. And you don't expect this is going to happen? This is like the old saying from Married with Children. If you give a chimp a gun and he shoots someone, You're gonna blame the chimp? Seriously, these guys are ex-gang members, still active gang members. They're, look at it, he football kicks them. They don't care. They were trying for attempted murder, and these guys got away with it. Why? Because the department can't afford to go on the air now and tell you guys and the civilian population, hey, these guys shouldn't have been there. We snuck them in there, so we got to make it disappear. But we got the video, and that's the problem you're looking at here.
Yeah, he's trying to get away. He just can't. And
he didn't. At one point, he even hit him with his own gas can. And I'm telling you, he's a young man, all right? Everyone on this panel has been around, so we would have handled that a little bit different. I'm not trying to jockey from a different position, but when you're young and this is your first time getting assaulted from that, like, the shock value is just as bad as going to combat and getting shot for the first time. You lose your bearings, and, you know, he's in good shape because he sustained the injury and ran, but he was so confused, he didn't know which way was up, and I can't blame that, you know?
Well, there's a lot of questions that we're going to have, but the first thing I want to do before we start kind of really breaking down this video, because there's definitely a lot of questions that's coming up as I see this. I want to go to Connie first. You know, as a civilian, you know, seeing this happen, one thing is, how do you make that, how do you feel about how effective we could be at protecting you? But also, how do you feel by just watching this video and seeing this hero get assaulted?
I mean, at first view, I think, you know, I guess I'm going to try to take off in that question. I'll try to take off my 20 years of experience, right? But like, I've never once seen sort of this level of response or like the slow response. So from an administrative perspective, the first thing I'm thinking is, so like, where's the response team? Why is there no urgency? Is this an understaffing issue, right? Like, are they not staffed well enough to actually protect people? As a civilian who would be coming into that work environment, I would be wondering, like, okay, so if they're not responsive with a sense of urgency for their own people, like, what happens to me when I'm off on the side somewhere, I'm doing a group somewhere, whatever service I'm there to provide? You know, there would be some questions about whether or not I would be safe and if there would be a response for me, right? I mean, I think the other thing is, how do I go to work tomorrow, right? Like, so I witnessed this happen to someone. I mean, just watching it, it's like, who wants to go back tomorrow and know that possibly there won't be anybody to have my back, right? Like, or maybe people are feeling such, I mean, whether it's fear or just disheartened or disappointed, or, you know, maybe everyone knows that there's an issue. So it's even worse if we've already complained and said there's an issue, and then the department hasn't responded and provided us with the support we need in order to be effective and in order to keep us all safe. So, you know, there's so much stuff that goes through my mind as I'm watching the video. And then on top of that, you know, from the medical perspective in me, it's like, okay, does he have a concussion? Is his neck broken? Like, there's so many injuries in my mind that he could have sustained just by going through that. So, like, I mean, anywhere from the safety and security side, the medical side, the not feeling like that's a place that I would want to work because I don't feel safe.
Yeah, and I think why this becomes personal to us is because any one of us could picture that being us, including, I guess, even civilians too, you know, because that could be them, you know, if there's not that protection, there's not that response. And then as we discuss later on, you know, when something like this happens, is the agency at the highest level doing enough to deter this behavior? You know, so the question is, the inmates being there is one thing. The question that we also have is what seems to be a very slow response, which we'll get into shortly. And then just also the fact that, you know what, this is not just a concern that's happening in Arizona. You know, you have a lot of facilities that are facing these same concerns, which I'm going to have Brian and Carlos talk about briefly. So before they go into it, I want you guys to realize something, guys. We do these videos for a reason. Reason being is this is knowledge for you to have so you can prevent. So now, if something like this happens at your facility and you're dealing with those same circumstances that Carlos and Brian are going to kind of relate to us, let us know what's happening at this facility, you have no excuse. I don't care if it's quiet at your facility all the time. At any moment, something can happen. So these videos are in an effort, one, to bring out knowledge, let people know the dangers we do and how we need to protect those men and women that working behind the wall. But the other avenue is for the agencies, you know, to say, guys, this could easily happen here. The last thing I want you guys saying is, well, that's in Arizona. That will never happen here. Well, at one point, maybe Arizona thought that, and it did. But to get a context of this video and to kind of understand that delayed response and just, you know, the system that they have in play, let's start with Brian first. Brian, what's the context? I mean, I know this facility is facing a lot of concerns. What are some of the concerns that you think led to this? You're muted. Let me unmute you. I'll unmute you. I'll take care of that. So bear with me. I'm learning this too. There you go, sir.
Okay. I was going to say, I would lay to Carlos on that because he has the inside knowledge of exactly what's going on there.
Okay. So Carlos, do you
I would let
mind
him
helping me out here, Carlos? What are some of the concerns we have? And I will unmute you as well.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you perfect.
All right. So, Anthony, here's the thing. When we see the video like this, experienced personnel see a lot of things, but we have to now dig at it because what we have here is an accumulation of failures that has culminated in one video. It's almost, I was joking about it with everyone, saying it's almost like the gods have said, we're going to give you every mistake that can be done, and we're going to show it to you on a video, and you guys have to take an opportunity to expose it so that you can see all the failures. So although we're seeing the beating that took down. So now here are some of the failures that happened, and you can, as experienced personnel, we see it. So there was no response. He was in there for about 2 minutes. Why? Because for years, and it's been getting worse and worse, our staffing has gone down so low, not just because of motivation problems, but because of attrition. Staffers just had it with these situations going down and nothing's going on, so they leave. They have a gag order here where they can't talk to the media and talk to no one because they'll fire them. That's a fact. That's in fact, though. That's in their policies. It's embarrassing to talk about it, that this state has done it for so long. I'm sure other states follow suit, but this is a problem that now is coming through. And what you see is a 2-minute beating because there was nobody to respond. A, we had nobody. Number two, the person who was observing it from that camera angle, there was actually an officer seeing that going down, who didn't belong there. They didn't work there. They got what they call cross level. That means that you are so short, you have to borrow an officer from another unit to come work there. So this poor officer comes there, not familiar with the unit, but knows how to work the control rooms because they're standard. When that went down, she tried to get help with a radio. And as she tried to key up, the radio was dead. Completely dead. It was broke. Later, the department admitted, yes, we know we have a lot of broken radios in Tucson. This was in our Channel 15 news. They admitted to it. We have a lot of broken radios. Hopefully by 2022, it'll be fixed. This is embarrassing. She had no way to call. And even if she did, who is she going to call? There's nobody there. So there is an outrageous amount of failures. She had to call her own unit on the phone, another unit, and say, hey, we're in distress here. I'm watching this horrendous beating. No one's answering. I can't get no one on the phone. The radio's broken. Can you guys relay? And it took 2 minutes. And then when you saw the response, the staff came in walking. There was only a few of them. There should have been a cavalry, my friend. So what you're looking at is that we're getting inundated in an avalanche of failures that have finally culminated in what you're seeing at. Everything that you can think of, short staff, no motivation, broken equipment, it all came to culminate. Level 5 inmates walking among staff. Whoa, horrible. Everything that you can think of bad that comes up in a movie, it showed up in that video.
Hey, Brian, I know when we were discussing it, and you brought this video to my attention, obviously there was passion behind getting it out there. So what were your immediate takes from this video, and where do you put the blame? I'm going to unmute you. There you go.
So personally, the way that I look at it is you have a catastrophic amount of things that went wrong that aren't supposed to go wrong. We're supposed to have safeguards in place so that these things don't happen or they're mitigated, right? But you have issues within the department that are ever increasing of staff morale is at an all-time low, staff attrition's at an all-time high. People are just leaving in droves. We don't have enough people to man the facilities as it is. They're running on worse than a skeleton crew lately. And you're not getting the type of, we'll call it observation from everybody all the time, because they're busy doing other jobs and they're busy getting busy work to do and paperwork to do when they should be watching other officers. Now, this case obviously isn't the only one. There's numerous other videos, as Carlos will get into with you. And it's not an isolated incident. I hate to say that.
Now, Gary, and let me make sure you're unmuted. So, Gary, from your perspective, and we're going to probably dive into this a little bit more, but I do want to get Gary's perspective. You know, if you were handed this video in a timely fashion, which we're going to go to that, because by the way, I don't believe from what I read that this video was handed over in a timely fashion, and we'll discuss that shortly. I believe that the only reason why people may know is because the video was leaked, at least from what the articles I'm read and from the experts on the panel. But having said that, just to get a perspective from Gary, as an investigator, what are some of the things that you're looking at if this video was sent your way?
Well, number one, I'm shocked at how long it's taking to get anything to the state attorneys. I just want to ask Carlos one question, and then I'm going to continue. Is it actually still 8 months and no state attorney has gotten an investigation yet? Is that correct?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Gary, Mr. York, let me tell you that we have another video with that we're going to share later with Tier Talk, because I want them to have it, where we've recorded investigators saying, listen, if there's a staff assault, we're not prosecuting. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So let me tell you, in this case, they were not only not prosecuted, but it wasn't until we called that they leaked the video to me one night, and I got a hold of Mr. Biscabine, Channel 15, and he called the DOC and say, hey, we'd like to ask you about an assault that happened. Once they brought it up, bammo, they decided at that point in time, I think this is a good time to prosecute these inmates. Horrible. I know it's horrible.
Okay. Thank you, Carlos, for what you do. And Brian, thank you for what you do for the officers. Thank you. Now, I want to say one thing first. Our prayers go out to that officer. I know from all of us. I hope that he's recovering well, and we pray for him and the other officers. Now, I'm very disgusted, because if your agency cares about the officers, you're going to start an investigation immediately. Now, I'm not saying that we're any better than anybody else, but we've had riots go down before, and 2 or 3 of us were set down the same day within 2 hours of the riot, as soon as we could get there, and we started the investigation immediately. This case should have 2 things going on from the minute this happened. Number one, a criminal investigation should have been started, and an administrative investigation. But first, because our officers, we need to do the criminal investigation. We usually were handed a case file, and you have 45 days to get that in. Okay, let's go a little further. If we tell our boss, hey, it's complex and we have a good reason, we could get 90 days for the criminal investigation, and that's it. And let me tell you something. This case, for the criminal part, is a piece of cake. These guys are on video, and you have that, and you can conduct this investigation within 45 days on the criminal part. You can have that in the state attorney's hands within 45 days. And let's show some respect to the officers out there, and let's get these guys prosecuted as quickly as possible. Now, as an inspector, I'm going to turn the case in as, attempted murder. I'm not an attorney. They can lower it if they want to. That's up to the attorney, not the investigator. But I'm going to put it in as attempted murder, and we're going to get these guys prosecuted. I'm going to interview each one of these dirtbags, excuse my language, separately, and I'm going to transfer each one of them to a separate facility away from each other, so they can't be in that facility. I sure hope they're not still in that facility today. I would hate to hear that. These inmates shouldn't be there. And then we'll do the administrative part. Now, that could take longer, because what I'm hearing from Carlos is a good agency who cares about what's going on wants to know everything that's wrong. And I'm not going to repeat everything Carlos said, but we're going to investigate why these inmates were classified the way they were. We're going to investigate why they're in that dorm walking around, why they're not on lockdown. Why do you have this young officer in this dorm with no disrespect to that officer? We all have to learn. We all started there. A young officer, what kind of deal is that? I want to talk to the supervisors. I'm going to get sworn affidavits. I may even interview the supervisors on tape. Why was he assigned to this dorm? Why was he alone in this dorm? Don't you have some more seasoned officers you could have put in this dorm? I think you get my message, what we need to do. We need to dig deep. We need to have these inmates prosecuted, and then we need to do an administrative investigation, which also will entail, Carlos and Brian, why is the equipment faulty? What do you mean you're going to wait till 2022? Are you kidding me? You're going to put more officers at risk after you just saw this happen? I'll stop rambling on, but I think you guys.
It's not a ramble. It's not a ramble, guys. You're making me. I want to ask a question real quick for you, Gary, real quick, and then we'll get Connie on as well. So here's the thing. So when you have an incident like this that happens in the facility, let's say that night, whatever it is, the next day that matter should be discussed, and at that table you should have administration, you should have the investigative division, maybe the heads of custody, some levels of operation, so you know that this incident would have been, I would assume, would have been at least discussed the next day, the day of, whatever it was. So at that point, wouldn't the investigators, because I'm assuming investigators should be objective, wouldn't they recommend automatically, because it's a staff assault, that regardless if administration wants to give us the video or not, we do want that video? They don't have to wait for the administration to give them the video, correct?
No, I'm coming in there to do an investigation. The first thing I want is a copy of that video. When we went to the riot at Hardy Correctional Institution, for you folks from Florida watching Tear Talk right now, we immediately started interviewing staff and inmates. We immediately got a copy of that tape, which showed inmates assaulting officers, which showed an officer being beaten by 5 different inmates. And we prosecuted all those inmates. And that officer was medevaced out to the hospital as well. We don't wait around and twiddle our thumbs and decide, should we investigate this? Should we not? This is automatic, folks. If you are true to the agency, you're going to be allowed to go in there as an investigator and clean house on this thing. Sorry, folks, but whatever comes out in the administrative part and all the bad things, that should be somebody high up in Arizona should say, I need that investigation. I want to fix all these problems. But I'm a little worried about how long it's taking. I'm going to say this word. I don't care, because I'm a little worried about cover up. That word cover up comes to mind. I hope it doesn't offend anybody.
I kind of, the only reason why I'm kind of leaning towards Gary, and I unmuted Carlos's mic, because I want to ask Carlos a question here. So obviously you would think, I believe, I don't know how your state works, so I guess you'll have to let me know. So the investigators are going to be the ones that can refer that. So it's not even if the administration didn't want to push it up. It doesn't matter. The next day, what I would expect, Carlos, and tell me if I'm wrong, is a discussion of the issue and an automatic, because it's a staff assault, an automatic request from that investigative division to look at that video immediately and then see what steps should be taken. So where was the ball dropped here?
Okay, can I tell a really bad story real quick? And I don't mean like obscene, but just an outrageous story. Okay, to make everyone understand, pretend for a second that you have committed an atrocious murder. You've just murdered a whole family. Pretend that now you go and they're going to hold the trial. And at this point, the judge says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to let you be your own judge and jury. Is that fine with you? And you go, sure. So they read everything that happened. You defend yourself. And at the end, the judge goes, well, how do you find yourself? And you go, I don't find myself guilty at all. Can I walk? And they say, done. Case dismissed. You're not guilty. Does that sound outrageous? But here's the thing why I'm telling that story. That is what's happening in our system, in the Arizona Department of Corrections. I did 20 years and I did 3 years with a director. I can tell you comfortably, this is a demon that we're fighting. This department has its own criminal investigative unit, okay? They also have their own administrative investigative unit. They all work for the director, and they work for one guy who's the inspector general. So here's the problem, and I'm going to say it clearly because I was there when it happened. The same inspector general that we have now was asked to walk, I say about 7 years ago when I worked for Director Schriero. He was told to walk because of the unauthorized, the crazy things that he was doing with his investigators and just letting cases go by and other things. But once a new director came in, they rehired the same fella. You're hearing this correctly. So that same fella now is sitting there running CIU, which is the Criminal Investigative Unit. Their job, my friends, I'm going to say this. Here's my face. I can say this as comfortable because I've been fighting for this for 2 years, and they know how I am. How are they going to do an investigation when their job is to cover up? Just like my friend Mr. York said, what are you supposed to do when their job is to cover up the faults that they don't want you to see? Those inmates, again, were not supposed to be there. Those are level 5 inmates. How are you going to release that? Very simple. You get a crooked, dirty investigator in there who's supposed to do what we were just discussing. And he just says, listen, I'm calling it. There's nothing there. It happened, blah, 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 blah. Whatever you want to say. That's my analogy. Imagine if you committed a crime, they go, listen, you're the judge and jury. How do you find yourself? I find myself not guilty. And that's what's going on. This is not something I'm making up out of passion. I'm not just coming up with a hypothesis. This is something have been banging out on the news and proving that we have a crooked system, man. A crooked, dreadfully crooked system going on.
May I say one more thing, Anthony? Anthony?
I hear you, Mr. York.
You can hear me. I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah. I can't hear Anthony though.
I can't either. I'm thinking.
I'm here, guys. I'm in the background giving you guys a chance to have your dialogue. So I'm watching.
Okay. All right.
We didn't know.
All right. Carlos and Brian, I was thinking the same thing. Here's why I was thinking that they're slow walking, taking this to the state attorney. They're embarrassed because the state attorney, when they get the criminal part, they're afraid they're going to learn about a lot of these administrative problems.
Yes.
And then the state attorney is going to start asking them questions. Well, how did these inmates get out of their cell? See, that's the key also. They don't want it to go to the state prosecutor. No, they're afraid of the embarrassment.
Yes, this video was horrible on many levels. This shows just a conundrum, just disastrous things that are going on, dirty. You know, I'm very vocal. Anybody that sees me on my YouTube channels or they see me and when I'm on the news, I'm vocal. I call it like it is. We have a dirty director. This is the second director that we've had who's just dirty. They will do anything they can to bury anything that has to do with staff. They've lied from the beginning. I'm saying comfortably because I was there and we have the proof. We have more videos and we have written documentation, and all they can do whenever let me tell you something. I'm leaving you with this thought here that's going to be really disastrous for everyone to hear. In Arizona, I don't know about every other state. You guys are experts in that. I only know Arizona, okay? There's no such thing as like a prison expert. I only know Arizona. I'm forward and backwards, I know Arizona. This state has complete immunity for things that have to do with criminal actions against our staff. Like we put them in a bad situation, negligence. You can't pursue them. You can't. I'm telling you, we've tried. The courts will say, listen, there's no such thing as deliberate indifference when it comes to a director. We fired a director, Ryan, who went on record and say, I didn't know the doors were broken. This was a couple of years ago. The doors were broken and inmates were coming out and just beating the hell out of our staff. And he goes, I had known nothing about it, even though we had recordings about him saying it. It was on written documentations. And in the end, the court said, we can't touch him. He's got immunity, man, against deliberate indifference. This is what we're working with here, man. We can't hear you.
Right, I see it. You know what's unique about this? So as we're having this dialogue, I hope people that are listening can kind of get an understanding of what is happening. I mean, not just in Arizona, obviously, but, we have these concerns also elsewhere, especially, actually, I can probably say a lot of the facilities across the nation are affected by understaffing, faulty investigations, and also, sad to say, but assaults on staff that is just not being taken to that next level so it can be deterred. And again, what I mean by that is, are we punishing the inmates that do assault staff, or like Carlos said, well, they work in a prison. So, and what's unique about it, guys, and we discussed this on the show the other day, is that if these crimes were to happen on the streets, these people would be held accountable for it. But I guess when it happens in the prison, not so much. And that accountability is what deters behavior. And Connie texted me something in the private chat that I thought was very powerful. And I think it's powerful because it comes from that civilian perspective. And I really would like Connie to kind of, break into what you just text and why did you feel the need to, text that? I unmuted you, Connie, I thought. There you go. You're unmuted.
So my thought as I'm listening is just really how vulnerable we are, right? Like, doesn't matter what title you have, what level of authority you have in the system, when in fact all of the systems in place begin to fail. Like, we are just, I don't want to say we're sitting ducks, but essentially, if these things are allowed to happen and then there's no recourse, there is no protection, all I'm thinking to myself is, so how do I go in to work the next day and in any way, shape, or form feel safe, right? So we see inmates out and about. They're locking themselves in. How do you get out your cell to get back in your cell on your own, right? Like, there's no control of that kind of thing. And then, so we know that there's an issue possibly with the cells. We know there's an issue with the radio. We see folks show up to the code without any, they're not suited up, right? And so in my mind is like, do we have gear that's going to protect us if we've got to suit up for a code? And it's just like all the things, as Carlos is saying, the culmination of everything that could go wrong. All I'm thinking to myself is just how vulnerable the staff are and that they feel, and like, how much longer do they still come to work, right? How much longer is it that you get pulled from one unit to go cover another unit, and this could be the outcome? And how many more incidents have happened that just didn't make it to the newspaper, right? It just didn't make it to the front page, to the news circuit, right? And that in of itself, to me, is one of the things that is most scary. And quite frankly, do we get compensated enough for this to be like the realities of our work?
Well, what's funny, Connie, you hit something right on the head. One thing is not having that backup, is, again, stops you from wanting to be effective. Because again, the reason why we're able to do what we do and take those risks is because we know there's people in the wings. Right? We know that we could take the risk because in the end of the day, there's people in the wings. But when you have an understaffed facility and you're pulling on those last resources, if those last resources get taken out, you just lost the facility. That's the concern. So now you're understaffed. You've got a response team that's coming from units that need to be occupied as a last resort. Now the concern is going to be is if that, and we'll get to the breakdown, I think we'll start that next, is if that officer that slowly kind of comes up and secures the inmate, you start taking out that officer, you're now taking off the last resource that protects this facility, and then also ultimately on the bigger picture protects the public, right? So you're not putting enough people in play here to ultimately do what? Protect the public, because that's what we're doing inside. And how do we protect the public is by protecting each other. There's no other way about it. If I don't protect my brother and sister, if I'm not able to protect my brother and sister, then you can't expect us on the bigger picture to protect our brother. You can't expect us to be effective. So it's crazy how they think we're expendable. But in the end, if we're expendable, then what's that say about the duty that we serve to the public? That I guess, our service just doesn't matter. So in the end, why don't we just let them govern themselves? It's just very unique. Now, I just want to get everybody back on the stream real quick, because I want to start actually breaking down the video, and then you know, kind of hit on certain parts that affected us the most during the video. So obviously you see the got the officer backed in the corner, and you have the inmates. I guess that's where the assault starts to happen. I know for senior staff, the ones that are hindsight bias or watching this, I know we would think differently. There's no way we're going to put ourselves in a corner to have a certain amount of inmates surrounding us. But again, guys, I just think it could happen. No one's perfect. You know what I mean? I think, you know, when you're working in a facility and you're one person in charge of so many different lives, you know, you put your attention on one thing and there's other things happening in the background, then you wind up finding yourself in a position that's like, wow, how the hell did I get there? But the first concern I have, obviously, is what happened in the upper left corner. So maybe I'll go with, let me just make sure he's unmuted. I'll go with Carlos first. So what is actually in the upper left corner? Is that another cell? Is that another way into the unit? I mean, why was the officer in that upper left corner with the 3 inmates around him?
That was a cell. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a cell. That's an actual cell. It's a housing area for the inmates. So he was doing some checking on them. That's an open door where the inmates live. So he was directly in front of a cell, and there's nowhere else to go. Those from that, starting at that end to the front, those are all inmate living quarters. That's what you're looking at.
Right. So then so he's just, let me just get us both in. So he's just pretty much doing his rounds, you know, and the inmates, because they're in lower level or because the security of the facility is just not where it needs to be, why he's got his attention focused in the cells, the other inmates could just unlock and open up their cell doors?
They were already open. Those that's part of the problem. Those inmates shouldn't be in there to begin with, as we discussed, but because of shortage of staff, what we've been talking about, they cut a lot of corners and they give them a lot of tier time where they can have free time, and they surround officers. This is a dreadful thing that, you know, when you see it, experienced staff say, well, I'm looking at a horror. This shouldn't be happening, but it does happen. But I want to say something about that real quick, because Connie got my attention, something that she said that's important, where she said, how do you find the motivation to go back to work after seeing this? But man, I got to say this, I've talked to thousands, literally thousands of our staff, because we have so many members. And there's one thing that we've come to a conclusion, Connie, and I know this is going to sound terrible, but I've said it in front of staff and they agree. A lot of staff, not just in our prison system, but in a lot of prison systems, they're living in like an abusive relationship. We have this with women and men both that get abused, and you tell them, I don't understand why you're going home to this man who's beating the crap out of you. You know what they tell me? Because I've had them tell me that, Mr. Garcia, you don't understand. I had it coming. I pissed him off. It's not always like that. They find every excuse. When you're in an abusive relationship, you come up with every excuse to go back until someone takes you out of there and unhypnotizes you, and then you go, what was I doing? These staff, my dear, are in an abusive relationship with the department. That's how they come back. That's how they keep coming back.
That was so spot on. The moment you said it, I was like, oh my God.
Right?
Because, you know, it is one of those things where, like, you know, you can't not be loyal to the work you do, right? Like many of us have given many years to the job. And, you know, if I call out today, we're going to be even more short, right? And it's like, even though you don't want to do those things that you know are more self-care, the reality is that you keep going back and you keep going back and you hope that things get better. And it doesn't get better until like something major happens. And then when you're out of the system, you're like, what, how did I not see that? So like, yeah, that really resonated with me just now.
And guys, you know what's funny about this too? For people on the outside looking in, the higher level inmates, obviously, when you are living in a higher level area, there are certain restrictions. Your privileges aren't as great as they would be in the lower levels, but also the amount of custody that's supposed to be around you. When you're dealing with a max inmate, again, if it's a very controlled and violent inmate, every time the inmate's out, you know, the inmate should be secured with 2 officers walking around. And then finally, when the inmate's secured in an area, then maybe you can unhandcuff them safely and then they can do what they got to do. So you have an officer now that has a unit that's mixed by themselves, you know, so even if the unit itself, which hopefully there's more than there should be, in my mind, I always thought of this for pods. No matter what, I don't care what level it is. You should always have 2 officers on the floor to have each other's back and 1 in the sky watching. The person in the sky, the biggest importance there, because they're the ones that can, get that assistance, and they should be untouchable and unreachable by the inmate population. Now, the sad thing is a lot of facilities run by the lesser the status. Well, that requires less officers. Yeah, but there's a bit of a balance, because the problem is the reason why you need more officers is because when you go to lesser restrictions, the areas are more open. So I feel in my mind, you still need that presence, especially when you're doing your searches, you're doing things that require your attention on that search. So it's always good to have someone behind you, just, making sure you're good. This way you can devote 100% to what's in front of you. My concern is when you have this mixed status, what happens is they're judging, and I'm sure there's some violation of policy, and Carlos could explain, but, they're going by the unit. Oh, it's a medium unit, but all the inmates medium? So it's a medium unit, let's get to one. Oh, guys, hold on. It was a medium unit. The moment you put a max inmate into a medium unit, the unit is now a maximum unit. At least that would be in my opinion. Carlos, what's your thoughts on that? And then I'd like to go to Gary and Brian.
My thoughts on that, and that over the past years also, and when this director stepped in, they started, what do I want to call it? Sanitizing the policies, okay? They started taking more and more out and giving more leeway to the department to get away with more things. For example, the override and the step down program is not really in policy. There's no written directives. They're just winging it. And when these videos were released, you know how many ADWs, high-ranking officials would call me like on Messenger and tell me, Garcia, that's completely, it's buck wild, as they said. It's a circus. We have no idea what we're doing. We don't know. There's no written directives. We're just winging it, okay? And they're telling us.
Real quick, when you mentioned the step-down unit, I think I'm familiar with that. Is the step-down unit something where they kind of rely on the inmates to govern the other inmates?
Yes, what they're doing here, that's not part of the step-down. They're using the step-down, which other states have, but it's done correctly. For example, Anthony, let's say you're an inmate that has reclass. You used to be a 5, but you've kept clean for a year. You have a good record, no tickets. You become a model, you're taking classes. It's okay to start bumping them down little by little, This is not all about just locking them down. It's through education, want them to succeed. But in this state, they don't do that. It doesn't matter if the inmate has, you'll see in the other video you're going to show probably next week. We have inmates that are assaulting this inmate assaulted officer. They still have a record of assaulting inmates just recently, assaulting other staff recently. And they've been bumped down under the banner of a step down, for example, or an override.
So what I was reading, I get that's where it was confused. I know the step down, technically, if done properly, is you get an inmate that was on a close watch and they work their way down, eventually an effort to introduce them back to GP. But there was something I found recently. I don't know if it was Arizona, but I'm pretty sure it was an article sent to me from Arizona where they do have a program. And I guess maybe the article I read mixed it, but I get 100% what step down is. It's, again, the introduction back into GP. But they also mentioned something about how they have like these inmates that are put in a position to influence other inmates for good behavior. And usually those are inmates that have that greater influence. I don't know if that was Arizona or... Yes,
it's Arizona, but that's very illegal. And now that it's out, so there's another, have you seen the video of a hostage situation that just happened?
Yes, we did a breakdown on that.
Oh, you did? On the one on the tier where the officers get surrounded?
No, that's the one that just got released. You're right. No, we did the one a while ago, and I think that one was also in Arizona.
No, we have a terrible one now that I think is going to be right up your alley. Is that the one where
they were passing contraband the whole time?
Yeah, they pass contraband on the 3rd floor, and in the meantime, they hold staff against their will on the 2nd floor. A bunch of STG, security threat group inmates, members of the New Mexican Mafia, and they told them, you're not going anywhere. Okay, those inmates have been given leeway by the department with this little program known as a step down program. All right, to let them get in there. These are inmates. This is horrible. I'm like losing oxygen.
Right. So let me just So I want to mention something so we're clear here, and hopefully it definitely gets the blood boiling. So there's two types of, unless they connected it to the one step down, I don't know, but you have the one step down, which ultimately is the highest level, bringing inmates into GP and then just kind of introducing them back to
through good behavior.
But right, so but I'm assuming they also developed something with the same name that gives inmates a bit of influence over other inmates. So we're trusting the inmates to govern the other inmates.
Yes, and these are gang members. These are gang members. This story, when it got out in Arizona, they're livid here because the department now doesn't want to comment on it. But the fact is that members of New Mexican Mafia and other gangs held staff against their will, and nothing was done to them. Why? Because we're back with the original argument with Mr. York. There's a cover up there. How are we going to prosecute inmates when we're the ones that gave them the authority to do what they just pulled? Right, Mr. York? How am I going to how am I supposed to tell those inmates, listen, you held inmates, our staff hostage, and we're going to do something about it? Although we allowed it, now we're going to renege and pursue you. It's not going to happen.
It sounds exactly like what we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
These cases that need to be immediately sent to the prosecutors to send a message to these inmates, to these security threat group inmates, to these other inmates we talked about earlier. They need to be prosecuted. They need to be charged. They need to have more time put on them. And the agency is scared. The first thing I thought of when I saw this before we came on tonight is, why would you wait so long? Is there something you're hiding? Something you're hiding is the first thing that came to mind.
You called it right. That's it. This is a battle we've been doing for over 2 years, and now we're doing it all over again. And these fellas just don't want to learn, and they just don't care because, again, the courts won't do anything against Mr. York. They have immunity against that type of action. They're untouchable. At one point, we called one of our directors that got fired the Teflon Don. That was Mr. Ryan. Remember him, Brian?
Oh, I remember him well.
The Teflon Don. He was untouchable. This guy could go on the air and say, it wasn't me. And then you go, isn't this you on video? And he goes, it ain't me. And he would get away with it. The Teflon Don. This is where we're at.
It's very true.
Is there an outside agency? We have Florida Department of Law Enforcement who can investigate.
No, that's why yours is intact. We can investigate ourselves as the department. That's the problem. That's why I told you the story.
Imagine no outside agency.
No, we have our own criminal investigative unit that responds. And if they want to whitewash it, clean it, send cleaners, they're going to do it. And I've got them on audio telling me that that's what they're doing. They just don't know it yet because I haven't released it yet. We're planning on doing that real quick here and just throw a lot of bad things at the state till they buckle. We got to win by attrition. We just got to keep just knocking them down because they just don't care here. They just don't care.
Gary, one thing is that there's a history of this in Arizona specifically, of this good old boy system covering up for each other. This isn't something that's totally new within the investigative realm, as Carlos could explain even further. But the thing is that now we're getting into an issue where people are covering things up that should be released to the public, and they're worried about numbers of people being hired and things like that versus the safety of the employees as a whole.
Right. And hey, hopefully you guys can hear me good. Working on. I wish I don't have a producer, guys. So we definitely discussed some of the concerns that we want to get out there, right? And these are some of the concerns I have a feeling the public may not be aware of. So it's a shame that the video had to get leaked for these information to get out, because you figure that the agency, you know, if they really cared, they would want the video to get out because they would want the public to know these are the dangers. Can you help us? You know, so when you have people that are in these higher positions, and me and Connie would call them positional leaders, they get affected by their pride, you know. But in the end of the day, you have to do what you can for your people. You know, if the problem still exists, you know, then you can't sit there and protect the problem, because if you protect the problem, then you're putting your own people out there. And the sad thing is it forces us to do what we can in survival mode. I can't go to the agency now. I'm going to have to secretly, you know, get this video sent to me. And then we're going to have to forward it out. And now at a moment when we all should be together, you know, doing what we can to make sure these inmates are held accountable, instead we waste all our time pointing the finger at each other, wasting all that energy. And at the end of the day, the inmate's walking free, getting ready to assault another officer. Connie, you've been at that higher level. The pointing the finger. I mean, right now, wouldn't you expect us at that highest level to be working together to make sure this inmate's held accountable? No different than people would be working together to make sure if we had a staff member that abused a level of force, we all be working together, right? I'm assuming to make sure that person's held accountable. Why are we not seeing that when it comes to the adverse of that? But Connie, the pointing the finger, what does that solve?
I mean, the pointing the finger we know solves nothing, right? At the end of the day, pointing the finger isn't going to resolve all of the systems that broke down, right? If anything, we should be looking at the systems to figure out why they broke down. Is someone troubleshooting to make sure that we get the actual equipment that we need? What are we doing to boost staff morale? And we're not talking about a pizza party, right? We're not talking about free t-shirts. We're talking about what are the actionable actions that we're taking to actually make sure people feel safe, they feel supported, they feel as though their lives matter in this environment where you could sit and watch somebody get completely assaulted. I mean, I can't anymore with the assault, but like to experience that, right? Like the pointing the finger at this point is not going to do anything for anyone. I feel that if there are people in place that are sort of perpetuating this process, that's where the finger pointing, I feel, would be most appropriate, because when you remove those people, you don't have a system that's crumbling. But the more that we continue to kind of just point fingers and sort of distract us from the things that are most important, the more we're going to have these assaults happening, because we're not dealing with the issues at hand, which is, how did this happen, right? Why are we reclassifying people, right? We know that it's dangerous what we're doing. We're putting people in step down. We're giving the inmates the opportunities to manipulate, right? We're giving them opportunity to do the things that they want to do. And then we're going to say, we don't know how it happened. I mean, come on. I mean, at this point, it really is a matter of how do we dismantle a system and rebuild it from scratch so that we have people in place who can actually get this job done and keep the public safe.
Yeah. And Connie, what you said, and I just want to make sure we get it out there too. When we spend our time pointing the finger at each other and no one's sitting there kind of taking onus and let's move forward, because let me tell you something. We evolve all day. Policies evolve, but sometimes it's someone has to step up and say, hey, you know what? This isn't working. But if you don't get people doing that and it's a battle of pride, then you get cover-ups, because it's not about what you could do best for the people. It's about what I can do best for myself. So when you start getting leadership that's selfish, I don't want to call them leadership, but when you start getting people in those higher positions that become selfish, then the end result is going to be this, but you're right, Connie, there's going to be nothing that's going to change because we're spending all this time, pointing the finger everywhere else. And there should be immediate action at this point, but we're delaying it because nobody wants to step up and say, yo, I fucked up. I fucked up. Maybe I'm not good to be in this position now that I'm accountable and responsible for these lives. But until you get someone to step up and say, yo, I fucked up, we spend most of this time going back and forth. Another officer gets assaulted. Officers are being held hostage. The whole time we're still pointing the finger at each other. And Gary, I mean, it's crazy when, you have a objective investigative authority that really shouldn't answer to the House, that should answer to that higher level. And, they wind up being limited, in my opinion. So when they're investigating, how do I trust that they're investigating the right things? How does staff trust them? I would guarantee you this, guy, just get your opinion. When you're at that table the next day after an incident, you're having that discussion, that's kind of meant to bring everybody together. Again, you have the operational people; those should be the higher level, the custody representatives, the investigative divisions, the administration, and part of the discussion is going to be like Connie said, what happened this day, and more importantly, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? That's how you begin that dialogue where everybody comes together, motivated with a plan, and sometimes that plan is going to involve some serious discipline, but ultimately a minimal administrative investigation. In this case here, we would need criminal, but you would bring people together and move forward. In this case here, because everybody's so worried about pointing the finger, I could just imagine a briefing where everybody's sitting together, and right when they go to mention it, it's like, nope, that's not my fault. That's not my fault. That's not my fault. So no one's worried about what do we got to do to prevent. They're worried about how do I protect my own ass, Gary? I mean, what kind of discussion should be happening at that table with the admin, the custody, and with that investigative division?
Well, what I see here is the high probability of the Secretary of Corrections in Arizona, some of the directors, they have their thumb on the Inspector General's office, and they're running them like a puppet. They've got them on a string, and this is the way this is going to go. And the Inspector General, instead of standing up and saying, "Boss, I'm here to do investigations, and I have to be fair and impartial on every investigation I do. Hey, boss, let me do my job. Let me get this criminal investigation done. Let me get this administrative investigation done, and let the chips fall where they may." That's the way it's supposed to go. So if it goes the right way, you're going to have your investigators, you're going to have your warden, you're going to have a director talking, getting involved in the conversation. You're going to have your boss, the Inspector General. Then you're going to have me, the senior inspector, reporting, saying, this is what I've got so far. But when I report back to you and say, bosses, because they would be all my bosses, I would be the investigator. Bosses, this is what I've got so far. It's not looking too good. They're not supposed to say, stop right there. We don't want to know about that. Just forget about that. Don't include that in the investigation. That's kind of what I'm seeing is going on here. You're supposed to say, well, find everything you can and give me a date when you can get that investigation to me so we can solve these problems, so we can get this to the state attorney. Those are the kind of discussions supposed to be going on. We're communicating with each other as the investigation is going on, but don't impede my investigation. Don't stop me from doing my job, what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's the way it's supposed to go.
Sorry, Connie, that was for you. You had a question. I hit you in the private chat to ask the question.
Oh, I'm like, where'd you disappear to? So my question, Carlos, is, are those inmates actually moved to another facility? Because if they said they're not guilty, like I just can't imagine that they could have this assault and those inmates would still be in the same unit.
On this particular assault, Connie, the inmates were moved to a what they call a maximum security. That was it used to be called Special Management Unit 2. They were moved there, but with no disciplinary at all. They just moved them to get them away from the officers and to remove it from that area so that it can go unheard of. So out of sight, out of mind. You know, when that happened, I interviewed a lot of staff that even worked the same unit, and they did not know about that assault. It was never passed on like a security bulletin saying, hey, we just had an assault last night. None of that. It was just completely swept away. You know, and what we were just talking about, like the Inspector General, that was true what he was talking about, but we'll take it a step further. The Inspector General is not, in our case, he's not just saying, please don't impede me, you know, I got to do my job. This is not the case here. In this case, it's the Inspector General saying, I'm on board, boss, with whatever you guys got going. We know about the level 5s that are walking. We know about the step downs. We know about the assaults on staff. We knew about the broken doors. I'm the Inspector General. I can cover that up. We're right now under a lawsuit from a little stunt that he pulled by taking a cell phone from one of our employees with no warrant, no nothing. He says, you know why I did it? Because I can. And he actually wrote it down for us. Of course, the attorneys looked at it and goes, have you lost your mind? What makes you think that you as an Inspector General can make that statement? Because no one does anything about it. In our case, it's not even. So my job, for example, in the union is to get information, verify it with hardcore evidence, present it in a package, give it to them. I'm putting it on a silver platter. Here's what's going on. And they just wipe it away, Connie. It's gone.
Yeah, I want to mention something too. So, by the way, the reason why Connie mentioned also the transfer of the inmates, so people know, one thing is to protect staff. We have some violent inmates. Second thing is just for the public out there, it's also to protect the inmates from possible retaliation. So I want you to know, even though these inmates did something horrendous, our staff's job is what? To still protect those inmates so we can make sure that justice is served. Now, just imagine if we don't believe in the justice system, if we believe the justice system is unfair. I mean, again, it's sad that, that we have staff that is motivated to do their job, will risk their lives because they feel that there's this higher level that's going to protect them. But then all of a sudden, when they fail to do that, and in this case here, if that's the case, how do you expect staff to continue to stay motivated? I want to do two more things before we wrap the video up. There's two parts of the video that I want to discuss, but I'll go with Carlos first real quick before we break down the last two parts of the video. What tools or equipment are the officers allowed to have? Do they have vests? Do they carry OC? Do they have handcuffs?
They have the standard issued, depending on the level that they're working at. For example, if they're working with higher custody inmates, they're allowed to wear a stab vest, that protects against that level. But everything else is basic issue that is given to them. They have handcuffs, they have OC, they have a radio, and then they have keys. So everything basic that you can have as a correctional officer, they have those tools, yes.
All right, so obviously I'm a big proponent of doesn't matter what status, always have the vest. And that's something that hopefully if someone's watching right now, inmate could be an inmate. And don't forget, guys, even though they're in full min, whatever it is, they still pose a risk because of that greater level of freedom. Actually, sometimes I know it may sound crazy, but if you have a secured lockdown max unit, that's a lot safer than a full min. I know it sounds crazy. Yes, the inmates are, highly violent, but they're controlled, they're locked down, and things are very tight knit. But when you have a full min area, it's more open. So I think the chances of greater concern could happen at a full min. So we shouldn't really be judging, an inmate's an inmate. I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. And granted, however we could protect our staff, it should not be limited by, they work in this, let them get this. I think if you have to work around inmates, you should be provided with the right tools to do the job. So, again, we saw the tool being taken away from him. So, guys, if you watch the video, look how scary that is, by himself. And usually you like to have that other person on the floor because if you do equip one officer with a tool, you don't want them to be a target. So you usually have someone next to them that if you want to go after him, I have his back. It kind of deters. But with that said, I want to go to Connie real quick. There's two parts of this video that I want to discuss. So I want to go to Connie first and then Gary. I saw the video from ABC 15 when Carlos mentioned something to me that really hit home. Carlos mentioned something to me, something to the news that it is something to me because it resonated with me. The kicking of the officer in the head, automatic attempted murder charge. I want to go to Connie first because we saw the video when the inmate did that. A kick to the head like that, Connie, from a medical perspective, I mean, what kind of damage can that do?
I mean, I'm thinking loss of consciousness. I'm thinking just swelling of the brain. I'm thinking sinus issues, visual issues. I mean, I think there's so much that could go wrong just from the kick to the head. I mean, and then compound that with, the throwing down onto his head, like he was picked up and I guess body slammed essentially. And when he fell to the ground, it was like his head, back, neck area here, which that in of itself, I'm thinking like possible loss of oxygen, airway obstruction. I'm thinking so many things from a medical perspective that could be going wrong. Memory loss. You think just loss of the ability to concentrate because you think, how do you come back to work and be able to be focused, right? Because that damage doesn't just go away. The trauma to the brain, the trauma to any part of your body doesn't just go away because, right? I was surprised, but you could see when he got up and he was kind of walking to the stairs, he was like disoriented. You could see that in the video. And that's not something that's just going to disappear just because. So in my mind, I would be thinking about what are the long-term damage that he's going to see over time that you may not see in this initial assessment because it just happened.
Right. And Gary, here's my thing too, Gary. So when the incident is done, you got this officer that was, assaulted badly. But let's say the officer's heart dedicated. Let's say this officer is lucky to survive this incident without any major injuries. Let's just say that. Does that negate the what the inmates did, the severity of what they did? I mean, okay, well, you know what? They kicked him in the head, but thank God the officer's all right. So is that going to lessen the charge from the investigator because the officer was okay? Or shouldn't we treat it as, you know what, but these are things that could have happened. And, thank God it didn't. But having said that, you're still going to be held responsible to the highest degree. Even if the officer is okay, you kick the person in the head. To me, that's that attempted murder. But if the officer manages to survive that, do you think that when you go to submit it up, they look at how the officer, how they recovered from the attack?
Well, of course, the state attorney wants the medical records from the officer because they want to see what injuries are noted in the medical records. So obviously they're going to look at that. But I wanted to point out one thing. I need to be, as an investigator, not just talking at the table with my bosses, the directors, the secretary of corrections, the warden, my boss. I need to be in contact. You have the state attorney prosecutors, but every state attorney office has a state attorney investigator. I need to be in constant contact during this investigation with a state attorney investigator. And what you just said, I've already, within a day or two, met with the state attorney investigator and showed in this video and the severity of these kicks to the head. And that's another key point to doing a good investigation. You're in constant contact with the state attorney investigator, keeping him updated, and he is keeping his state attorney prosecutor updated. We're working as a team on both sides, from the department heads down in the department, and then me moving into the state attorney's office, working with the state attorney investigator and the prosecutor. And we're pointing out, we want you to charge them with attempted murder. Look at this. He's being kicked in the head here, over here, and again. These guys weren't just kicking once trying to scare him. They had the intent and the capability of killing this man, this officer.
Right. So I want to get Brian on. Brian's my hero in this video, by the way, because Brian's the one that, and don't worry, Brian, I unmuted you. He's the one that kind of made sure I went forward with this. And by the way, thank you for that, Brian. You had a good question that you wanted to ask Carlos. So I'm going to kind of let you ask Carlos that question because I saw it in the private chat. And then when Carlos answers that, I want to get to one more part of the video in which I want us all to kind of give that last breakdown, something at the end that I want to go over. But go ahead, you got that question.
So yeah, so my experience is all in working in the Supermax or maximum custody facility. So radios were the most important thing that we dealt with, aside from being able to fight or pepper spray people. But Carlos, I was wondering, actually, I didn't ask this question before. Was anything done about the particular unit's radios immediately after this happened? Like, did they get replaced? Did they get repaired? What was the issue, and why? That contributed to a lack of, backup coming immediately. So, I mean, what did they do, if anything?
We asked that same question. Now that you brought it, we brought that up to the media. Biscabine brought it up, and we brought it up. I myself brought it up to them, and they never responded on what they did with that. When we talked to staff, they said the radios were never addressed. So this was completely just swept away. As you know, as I know, they're not going to answer that. And they're very comfortable going on the media, like you say, and making a blanket statement. Our job is to protect the department and the public, and we do the best that we can. And they blanket code it, but they never answer direct. So there was nothing done about the radios. And matter of fact, the last statement they said is that they were going to have them fixed by 2022. The most ridiculous thing you can hear in 2022. This is what we're dealing with, folks.
Doing the best that you can and doing the most that you can are two very different things. And we both, I think we all here understand that they are not doing that the best that they can.
You guys realize that they also didn't offer the officer cert. That's something standard. If someone gets assaulted, you bring him in, you counsel them, you need help. We understand there was trauma. None of that went down. There was never no victim notification. That's one of the first things I did when I interviewed these people. And I said, are you getting victim notifications from the state? That's common. Okay, that's standard issue. You get assaulted like that, the prosecution goes after the inmate. You get in the mail yourself saying you're a victim. In this case, you are a victim. Here's where we're at. We're prosecuting here. He didn't get anything. That was our first alarm that there was nothing done. And when we checked, absolutely nothing was done. He was never offered cert, no prosecution, nothing. This was swept away.
That's actually a good question, Carlos. So let me ask you a question. So I know we discussed this on our show that a lot of agencies, they kind of focus on the physical recovery and they really don't chase after that mental recovery. But would the officer have been able to, after they got assaulted, because now when we have, let's say when you have an assault, definitely family members, your union, all of them should be notified, including the highest up levels. But would it have been possible at that moment when you found out that this officer was assaulted? Could they have brought charges on their own? Like, could they have went to like the local PD or whatever it is and brought the charges on their own?
No, sir, not in Arizona. The department will just refer you saying you've got your own department, which is CIU, the Criminal Investigation Unit. These men are all ex-cops, things like that. You know, we're going back to my original outrageous statement. Imagine if you can exonerate yourself from a death sentence. That's what's going on in this department. So no, you go to an outside agency, the department will come after you with policy saying, why did you go outside the agency when clearly we have our own tools in place? Why did you go to the media? Or we prohibit that. They've done everything they can to tie this animal down and keep the dirt inside. That's the truth. That's not making it up.
Hey, Gary, if you could unmute yourself, I'm trying to unmute you. Gary, I mean, is that something that an agency can do, though? Can they stop like, let's say this officer here from pressing outside charges?
Yeah, the media part, I kind of understand. You want to kind of have your media people take care of that business. But let me tell you, you have a right when you're off duty as a citizen to go to the state attorney and tell them, and you can say, as a citizen, I want to press charges, you know, and that agency should not be able to impede you from that right of going to talk to the state attorney. You're a victim. If they don't want to take the case and get it done and get it to the state attorney, the officer should have that right to go talk to the state attorney. But I understand what we're dealing with here, Carlos, you know, and Brian. They're stopping everything. It looks like they got the brakes on everybody. Fear
will kill you quicker than a bullet, my friend.
Yeah, I think that, you know, for a later discussion, maybe that's something we should start exploring, like assaults on staff when we feel the agency isn't doing enough. What we can do, matters that we could take on our way, including we had a discussion yesterday about inmates, exhibitionists, you know, just exposing their penises. Again, you know, if you feel that the agency isn't doing nothing, then maybe you should have that avenue to go to. You know, again, that's just a recourse. Now, the last part of the video, I'll start with Brian first because I want to give Brian some airtime. I mean, he does have a channel called Talking Guns, but we haven't heard a lot of talking because it's just, you know, Brian's the kind of person that's going to sit back and he's going to let the people get the message out there. And I just, that's what I respect about Brian. So, but Brian's more than just a pretty face at Satire Talk. You know, and I want everybody to know that. I mean, he's more than just my eye candy let's just take a look at Brian because you guys may not, but this is eye candy. Beautiful. This is what the women.
If only I was a woman. If only I was a woman.
Guys, if you think he's eye candy, comment below.
Carlos, I'm sure for the right amount of money, we could both be happy.
If only I was a woman, my friend. If only I was a woman.
This is one of the things I want to. This is to me. Before we close off, I really wanted to get this out there. The response. Now, I know the facility is understaffed, so the response is already risky because you're already on your last resources. I get it. The response of the officer that's coming in, going to that stand-up inmate, and just kind of casually putting the handcuffs on him. I mean, we were having this discussion the other day on one of the live feeds. Okay, so here's the concern, guys. Let me just mention something real quick. I just want to make sure we know something. Inmates know that after they do this assault, and I think Gary may be able to comment on this before we go to the last part of this. Inmates know that they're under camera, so we have to be very careful in how we respond, because if the inmate in the public's eye doesn't seem to be a threat, even after what they just did, they're going to get us. I mean, you got to see how many lawyers will call up to, represent an inmate after they assaulted staff, because they expect that there's going to be some retaliation. So what we got to do is, at that point, to make sure that we have clean justice for this inmate, we have to do whatever we can to go ahead and protect that inmate so we can go through the system, and then the inmate is strictly defending their position as opposed to them taking the baton and then, running the offense with it. So I know sometimes after a staff assault, inmates are expecting custody to come at them aggressively. So right on camera, they become, less resistant. They show that they're not a threat, which obviously makes us a bit hesitant. My concern was for this issue was, let me just get us all back together, was that if I would have came onto that scene, I would have at least been verbally aggressive. Get on the floor, whatever you got to do. I'm not approaching that inmate while they're standing up. I would have been very aggressive to get, I could do it from a distance, get on the floor, because in my mind, you're still a threat. You could have turned around and popped me. So I didn't see any action in regards to them wanting to, give that inmate verbal directives to get down on the floor and then make sure the scene is as secure as possible. But let me go to Gary first, and then I want to go to you, Carlos. But Gary, would you say right now that because we have the cameras, obviously, the response team has to make note that inmate's on camera and they're purposely making it know that they're not a threat? Our response has to be very, very careful, but we could still be aggressive in our verbal, right?
Right. And number one, walk in there or not walk in there fast or run in there with a purpose. Don't just walk in and act like everything's okay. One officer, get that inmate down on his knees and get him cuffed. Another officer, start getting those other inmates locked down. Give verbal orders. Lock down now. Lock down right now. We're locking down now. You want to hear all that. Get on your knees. Put your hands behind your back. And another officer needs to go to the injured officer and get him and help him. And this all needs to be seen, because a defense attorney, like you said, Anthony, might go, oh, well, look, he wasn't that bad of a problem, was he? He just stuck his hands back there and let you cuff him. Hey, what the public doesn't know and what a jury doesn't know, and we have to get that across to the jury, once these guys do their dirty deed, just like on the street, they do their dirty deed and then they go, oh, I didn't do nothing, officer, I'm okay. Get out there and have some purpose to what you're doing. You're responding to a fellow officer in need. Let's get your ass moving, to put it plainly.
Yeah, because I know, guys, you got the videos on, so inmates know that the moment that happens, they know that team's coming aggressively. They're going to, be at that point compliant. But I still feel that the officer that came onto that scene should have given some safe distance, aggressive verbal responses before he approached the inmate. I don't want a hindsight bias, but if people are watching this video that are new, they're all seeing it, and not just new people. If a new person texts me or messages me and says, Gangi, what's up with that response? Then, the other people that are watching this channel, the more senior staff, are saying, could they have been more aggressive? You know what? I'm not going to promote that we should have tore that guy down and beat him. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is verbally, they could have made some, directives and some commands that would have put that inmate down, advertised some level of authority. And at that point, the inmate is being non-compliant. Then it gives us a chance to say, hey, we've given them orders. They're not listening. Now we have to bring our be a little bit more aggressive with the handling of that inmate. But, what's your thoughts? And I want to get everybody's thoughts on this. So let me go with Brian first, to be fair. What is your thoughts on that response?
So the things that were pretty apparent to me were, where was the urgency? It just didn't seem like there was enough urgency. Now, I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback the officers, that came to the other officer's rescue. I get it. They obviously didn't know the severity of the situation they were getting into. So that comes down to a communications issue, right? So back to the radio, back to the phone, whatever wasn't working and whatever information wasn't relayed possibly caused these guys to not be that urgent. Now, when I was working, we had a team, and it was an A team that if there was a problem, these guys were the ones that were coming to save you, essentially, right? And then if there was an even bigger problem, then we had a designated armed response team, right? That's like a complete melee happened, and we got to get the entire yard under control, or majority of it, right? There didn't seem to be any kind of response there. Now, one thing I don't know is, Carlos, was there a supervisor there. What was one of those people a supervisor? Were they immediately there? Did they take forever to get there? What is the story with that?
You know, there's a German philosopher who once said, and I love this, that he said the best way to take control of a people is to take things little and at a time, and eventually they don't miss it, so that when you finally go in and do a full coup, they're hopeless, okay? So when I came in 95, we were under a knuckle-dragging system. We could do whatever we wanted. They were out of control. Inmates would say something, they were taken down, beat down. You can't do that, okay? So we progressed, and then we went into a more gentle Department of Corrections, and there was more lawsuits coming in from the inmates, and then the department started buckling, saying, listen, this is not working, okay? The knuckle dragging is not working, and the lawsuits are killing us, so you guys have to tone down your approach when you deal with these things. Now, if your life's in danger, you can do what you got to do. But Brian, if you remember correctly, a lot of staff recently over the past 2 years, if they spray an inmate, they get 40 hours off.
Correct.
40 hours off, and they're going, what the hell? You're allowing me? I was defending myself. Doesn't matter. This abuse has been going on for so long, all right? Where we have a whistleblower that blew the whistle during the COVID, saying they're not giving us proper attention. People are dying. They later fired one of the whistleblowers when he took an inmate down that was very legit, and they fired him. This kind of taking away little by little by fear, and staff seeing it, hey, if I respond aggressively, they're just going to take away my job. Little by little, they've been taking and taking. So I'm not trying to defend them for the way they reacted. What I'm saying is that there's a history of staff going in and doing the old approach, saying, everybody get down, eat dirt, immediately. And they get reprimanded. You guys went in there, you got to give them a period of cool down. This is the way our policies work now. If the inmate's upset, don't approach him. Let him cool down for like 10 minutes and then go talk to him. And then be careful, don't use foul language. They've been beat down. It's an abusive relationship. I don't know if that was a factor, but there was no response from a supervisor. And the staff that went in knew clearly that there was something very grave going on. And yet they chose to take it upon themselves to be in the most passive way, because the inmate put his hands behind their back. So I'm sure that they're immediately jockeying in the position, saying, well, he already surrendered. What am I going to do? Foot sweep him and take him down? I can't do none of that, because we're on camera and they will go after you. It's been proven. They've been fired, 40 hours off, or being handed out like candy in the department. So did that contribute? I think it did. I think it did. There was an abuse going on of taking away and intimidating the staff to not talk, not to act aggressively, keep down the lawsuits. Look, we're going to put walking fives around you. You're not going to say anything. You're going to deal with it. We don't have staff. We're short. Deal with it. That's what you get paid for as a correction officer. This beatdown and conditioning has led to this catastrophe that you guys are watching on this video. And we're trying to make sense of it.
You know what this reminds me of, Connie, real quick? So sometimes when you have facilities, and again, guys, I want you to realize I'm not condoning it. I don't condone jailhouse justice, but in order for us to understand, to address the concern, you have to kind of look at all angles and what are some of the possibilities when we feel staff has gone a little too far. And again, just hear me out. When staff doesn't feel that they're protected from the highest level, and they feel that there's nothing to deter that behavior, and again, I'm not condoning it, and the inmates know it. The inmates know, well, I can do whatever I want. Nothing's going to happen to me. Staff, in an effort to protect and to get into survival mode, they go a little excessive. And again, I'm not condoning it, guys. I just want us to get an understanding. And then the people above, they're the ones that make the complaints that staff are abusing force, but you're also creating a culture where staff doesn't feel protected. So one of the things I would do is, yes, I would hold people still accountable for abusing their level of force. Don't get me wrong. But I would still want to look higher up to see what's really happening here. What's the biggest concerns? To start holding everybody accountable, including the culture that allows the inmates to assault staff so freely, where staff feels that the trust is no longer there. So we're going to cause the deterrence. And again, it's a jailhouse justice. We don't want that happening. But if you really want to address it, and you start getting these attacks on custody that are, excessive in nature, then we have to go back and look at the higher ups and saying, you're allowing a culture like this to happen. So now when the officers start defending themselves, you want to hold them accountable. Okay, I get it. But you yourself also have to be held accountable because these inmates are doing it, and you can hear them on, they say it. It's like, what are you going to do to me? That's the scariest thing for an officer to ever hear. Is after they get assaulted or after they get splashed or whatever it is, what are you going to do? Because when they say, what are you going to do? That's a reflection of the highest of highs saying we don't care. I want people to know that. So we can start wrapping it up, but I wanted to know real quick. Hey, Gary, first, and I'll have one last question for Connie as well. Gary, what's your thoughts again? Just want to cover that last part on that response from the investigator's position. The officer, do you think the officer should have kind of gave some verbal commands? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Well, when we investigate this, every one of those officers is going to have to give a sworn statement. So I'm going to be interviewing every single officer. How did you get notified? Where were you? Where did you come from? What did you see the minute you walked in there? What did you hear? What did you do? And we want all that. We have to have all that on a sworn affidavit to go to the state attorney's office. And I would have the video with me in case I want to interview them and also play the video for them at the same time and say, well, what are you doing here? You're walking in real slow. What's going on here? I'm going to have to get each officer is going to have to explain their part to me and write a sworn affidavit on what they did. Well, I'll let them look at the video. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. They can look at the video to review what they did, but I need to know why they did what they did and what they did and what they thought when they entered. What did they see? What did they feel was going on? And we'll be fair as can be because they're just witnesses. They're not suspects, folks. Let me make that clear. None of those officers are going to be suspects. We may ask a few questions. I would have liked to have seen a little swifter movement, a little more fire lit under them, more verbal commands, quickly removing the inmates and not letting those other inmates walk around. Let's hurry up and get them locked down, and someone else assisting the officer, which maybe someone did, but I don't know if I saw the officer walking around a lot after the incident.
Well, that you know what? Again, we'll play the video. Does the officer escort the inmate by themselves across the floor? Was the officer by himself? Does anybody remember that? Either way, we'll show the video, but I get what Gary's saying. I mean, again, I would have preferred that, you got to establish a level of authority, and you could do that with the command of your voice, and see if the inmate is at least listening to that. And if you're giving those directives and the inmate's not choosing to listen, that can promote a more aggressive response. My concern is going there nonchalantly. The inmate to me is still a threat. What was stopping that inmate from turning around and popping that officer? The officer was not in a vantage point, if that makes any sense. And I got to ask Connie, before we wrap it up, Connie, I want to get your perspective. You sat on the admin level. I mean, what is your perspective on that response? Do you feel that officer responded was hesitant? Do you feel the officer had control in that response? Or do you feel that the unit was controlled when the officer was walking across the floor with the inmate? It's very important that we get it out there because, again, guys, the videos here are an effort to learn, not to minimize the heroes. But if there is a concern, trust and believe, if we don't bring it out here in the comments, it's going to come out. And if we have to give everybody, reality and what's there, then we have to be willing to touch on those areas that aren't so friendly. But I promise you, it's in an effort of good faith. So go ahead, Connie. I kind of smoothed the bridge over for you, Connie, before you.
So I think certainly, so seeing the OC, the can on the ground was one thing that was a concern. Certainly when the officer came in, it felt to me as though the inmates were in control of the unit. Like they decided to stop the assault. They decided to essentially surrender. And the person that's up on the stairs, on the left-hand side, you see them handcuff, or I see them walk over, and I can't remember if they were handcuffing someone. I think he put his hands behind his back. you know, and even I was trying to figure out if there was a door to the bottom right of the screen. We can't quite see what that is, because there was a point where like the officer, in my mind, I'm like, he could have left, right? Like he could have just abandoned ship in my mind, as opposed to continuing to be a part of whatever was happening in there. And I felt like it said a lot about him, you know, hearing Carlos say that he was a newer officer. I'm like, he just didn't give up, you know. And the fact that if that was a door at that bottom right of the screen and he had an opportunity to kind of just get out of there, because like all I'm thinking too is that is really an opportunity for the inmates to take over the unit, right? Like, so I get him not leaving, but he had just been assaulted in a major way. And here it is, the cavalry isn't coming, right? Like I remember at Rikers, there would be a code call and all you heard was boots and keys. Like everyone just moved out the way. You saw the glass shields coming. Like there was a whole situation happening when those kinds of things happen. And so for this to happen, to see the level of assault that was happening, and then to kind of see the inmates kind of, I'm going to go back to my cell. It was like no big deal, but there was like at least like 3 inmates at one point was beating them up. Here comes another 2 or 3. It's at least 5 individuals who put hands and feet on this officer. And how does only one person get walked out in handcuffs, or 2 people? So I'm kind of just trying to figure out the dynamic, and maybe there were some things that just wasn't on camera, so we couldn't see it. But like, it was just, even that part of it was disturbing now that everything had kind of wrapped up. So like, where are all the people who was just beating up this officer?
You mentioned a good point too, where when you have that limited response and you have all those inmates out and there's no control of the unit, opening the door to get to save that officer becomes a risk, because now those inmates could take over the next area, you know, and the next area. So, I mean, you know, when you don't have that response, I mean, again, you know, it makes sense to come in a little aggressive, because, again, you got to make sure that, you know, you don't get taken over at that moment when you're trying to come in, because you lose control of that door. You lose control of the next area of the facility, you know, and next thing you know, you have a whole facility that is in some serious danger, you know. So again, you know, the key here is, guys, limited resources. You know, at this point, here's the scary thing too. This could have been a setup to get, you know, that team there and to take control of the facility, because these inmates know the facility is understaffed. You know, so you have to be wary of that immediate response too. You know, inmates could be doing this because they know that there's not that many officers on that shift, or they know what's going on. So you know what? Let's get this officer. And when the team comes to respond in, what is going to be 1 or 2 people? We'll go after them. You know, so it's a very scary situation, because you think you're going to protect that officer, but the end result is that you become a victim as well, or a hostage, as they now have control of, you know, a bigger part of the facility. And I want to say this before we get our comments from our panel. The closing comments is, the biggest threat to any facility is inmate unity. And we saw that in this video. We saw inmate unity. So I just want people to realize that to us is always the biggest concern. You know, when inmates start finding whatever that cause is, and they start uniting, and they start, you know, trying to justify what they're doing. Like, well, you know what, I had to beat this officer up, and they try to, you know, say, well, it's because of, you know, not programmed, all this other stuff that they say. When the public starts feeding into that as a motive, it's not, you know, anytime an inmate doesn't get what they want, they're going to be able to unite and come after staff. You know, the public has to also sometimes be, because I will guarantee you there's people watching this video rooting for the inmates, because they generalize us as the bad guys, and we're all pieces of shit, and it's great to finally get what's coming. Really, guys? I mean, even if that was an inmate who did, you know, some crazy things, on the human side, it's tough to watch someone get beaten up like that, regardless. You know what I mean? As just something you shouldn't get yourself used to. But the fact is, I will guarantee you there are people that have so much animosity towards the system that they're in those comments, you know, loving it. And then what happens here is that you have attention seekers in the prison, you know, inmates who are going to say, well, hey, this kind of action gets supported, so now I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the one now that's going to attack the next officer. So for those idiots that are supporting this behavior, all you're doing is motivating someone else to jump an officer, a civilian staff member, because you want to be a fool in the comments. They don't realize that what you say in those comments, what you push, does affect us. Because the sad thing is, as much as we try, inmates, sometimes they get a hold of social media. You know, it's sad. We try our best, but, you know, again, the system is not perfect. Or sometimes they get media outlets that only want to air that side of the story, saying, well, yeah, they may have taken hostages, but these are the reasons why. Who cares what the reason why are? Don't minimize the fact that they took someone hostage. You know, we can investigate the issue, but what you're doing is you're condoning the hostage taking of somebody. Someone who came to work trying to do the right thing, wanted to get home. But you know what? Yeah, let them get taken hostage because the inmate didn't get their way today. That makes perfect sense. It's ridiculous. That you have an inmate that does something foolish and they look to minimize it by no matter what, it's always our fault. And then what happens is the other inmates are like, hey, guys, we can keep on doing this because it's never going to be our fault. You know, it's never going to be our fault because in the end, it's always the facility. You know, it's just crazy how they minimize the actions, you know, and they blame it on everyone else. Hey, Bri, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, I'm excited for the next panel. I think we've covered almost every topic that we possibly could regarding this. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more coming out with this as the state hopefully releases more information on what happened and what has happened since everybody has been able to see this in the public. So I'm looking forward to that. And going over the next video, which is just as disturbing, if not more.
Yeah, I know you got to, please send it my way because I got to do some edits. Hey, Bri, Talking Guns. How do people, you know, what is that and how do people find it?
Instagram, Talking Guns. We are on Facebook, Talking Guns Media, and on YouTube, Talking Guns Media.
All right, always a pleasure, Brian. I'll wait for the video and then we'll discuss it and then we'll have another, you know, as soon as we can. We'll try to get it before Thursday because this is information that needs to get out as quick as possible. So thank you, Bri, for, you know, just being that advocate, man. Good. You know, I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. Carlos.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, first time you were on the show. How was it?
It was wonderful. Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed everyone on the panel. And
I know we're not ABC 15, but I believe we cover a little bit more.
Whatever. Hey, you know, ABC 15 is not, it's not even a tool for us. I mean, they're just there and it's nice to have, but that's not the way to get out this information. This panel that you got going here is much more effective. I mean, I don't want to be talking bad about the media, but they have their own agenda too. Their agenda is to make themselves the channel that it is. Although the guy that I work with is very self-interested and he has a sincere interest in public service and what's going on. But really, public awareness is where it's at. And I hope that civilians that are watching this, that have families that are incarcerated or not, taxpayers realize what's going on and that prisons, they like to put them far away from civilization and out of sight, out of mind. And the only time they get to see it in these little cheesy shows like The Orange is the New Black or whatever they call those shows. And that's not reality. The reality is that human beings are suffering in these prisons, both civilians, both officers and staff. And due to negligence and this discrepancy that's going on, they're suffering. It's not good. They should get involved. They should.
Yeah, and it's panels like this that kind of, we just want to get the information out there
Sure.
and let people judge on their own. I thought we were fair. I mean, not only did we get the high level, we also talked about the response. And it's great. Now, I got to bring up Connie, but I do have Connie muted for a second, so I can actually say what I want to say. You brought up Orange is the New Black, Carlos, and that's what motivated Connie to enter corrections.
Yeah.
Oh, there she goes. Hold on. Hey, Carlos, by the way, thank you for coming on, brother.
Thank you.
Let me get Connie in. Well, no, hold on. It's not a rush. Let me just explain how Orange is the New Black motivated Connie to get into. Wait, hold on. She's doing some type of override. Hold on. Oh, she overrode. Oh, man. Oh, she took
God.
Connie, just explain how Orange New Black motivated you.
Oh my God, Carlos, he's being untruthful. I've not watched a single episode of it because I lived it in real life, and someone even gave me the book when I left the female facility here in Connecticut. And I said, okay, I guess I'll give it a read, but I've never seen it. So I don't know why he's making up stories on me right now.
But Connie, do you have any closing comment? And also, just in closing, can you also talk a little bit about the Civilian Correction Academy, please?
Sure. So the Civilian Corrections Academy really came about because I was that civilian. I worked on Rikers Island for 10 years. I didn't go through an academy training. I had some really great officers that kind of took me under their wing, and they were like, yeah, don't do that. Don't say that. You shouldn't do this. And times when I didn't respond to stuff, they were like, no, you have to go and address that. So I would literally learned firsthand from some really great officers up front. And then when I came to Connecticut, I had a similar experience where, after 10 years, you're thinking, I don't really need an academy training, right? But I feel like each state, each facility has its own culture. There's things that you should be learning. And so because that happened, I kind of made it my mission that no other civilian would come into the workforce or come into corrections without having training. And so, most facilities try to do an abbreviated version of an academy training for non-uniformed employees, but that's usually covering maybe some downing the duck, some of the operational safety security type things, and maybe some personal safety, but really not how do I engage as a nurse, as a doctor, as a social worker, as a dentist. How do I engage with an inmate? How do I de-escalate a situation? How do I know what contraband is? How do I know whether these rules apply to me or not? The goal is to make sure that that gap that most civilians come into corrections with is just a little smaller. Certainly I don't cover everything, but I have 8 modules just to make sure civilians get the right exposure and the right education as they're working in these environments, and hopefully, save somebody's career, because I've walked out quite a few civilians in my career, and that's never fun.
And Connie, would this be a video that you think the civilians entering this profession need to see?
Absolutely. I think there's a way we don't necessarily have the insights into what the officer faces in the housing unit. There's a way that we're not connected to the dangers. So we may see inmates in a controlled setting. Usually we have like an escort officer with us or someone who's there to protect us. And so just to see an officer in a unit solo with many inmates, I think that is very insightful. One of the things that I thought was just a great learning experience to me is I had a security dep who one day was like, let me show you all of the contraband that we find. And I was like, what? Some of the weapons, some of the, just all the stuff that like a civilian we typically wouldn't see. It gave me a different level of respect for what officers are doing and how they protect not just us internal to the facility, but also how they protect themselves. And why is it more important for me to go home safe, but I'm not thinking about how you get home safely, right? And so I think there's a certain way that the partnership, the collaboration that I'm constantly pushing for really matters, because then we have one team that's trying to make sure everybody gets home safe, as opposed to the us, them, and that's your job, not mine.
And that's, guys, to be honest with you, that's what we've always been trying to do. Me and Connie have been working on that for a while. We have the conference out in Nebraska. We're definitely going to be mentioning that. If you guys are out in Nebraska, August 11th to the 13th. Gary just wanted to, he had to go off. He found out about a death.
Oh.
His phone died. And what? Come on, guys. Sometimes you gotta. It's jail humor, guys. It's prison humor. But his phone was down to 1%, so he apologizes. It just wasn't strong enough for him to say the goodbye. But guys, the reason why we did this show is obviously to bring attention to not just the concerns that are happening in Arizona, but at any point it can happen at your facility. So these videos that we put out there are reactionary to some extent because we're not aware of it until it gets sent our way. But now it becomes preventive. See how that works? It becomes preventive if you choose not to ignore it. If you choose to ignore it, then it kind of misses out the purpose of why we just spent 2 hours of our own time, discussing what these concerns are from every possible angle. We will have the next video come up. I'm very curious to see that video with the officers being trapped, the contraband. So I believe that's the next video we'll work on with Brian and Carlos. But as always, guys, we do this because we love you guys. We want you guys to feel safe. And in the end, guys, we do want a facility that works well with together. If we work well and we all worked as one, there's nothing the inmates could do. It's just the truth. But most of these problems that you see at these facilities is because everybody is just isolated from each other. And in the end, we're more about, covering ourselves as opposed to working together and just doing what we can to improve, which includes improving ourselves. Leaders learn every day. They learn every day. So as always, guys, this show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.